historic ship, USS Constellation. Do you know that historic ships have more than just US Constellation? We will have a tour. Have a look at this.
USS Constellation. There's a grand lady in Baltimore who has taken her rightful place as the Inner Harbor's crown jewel in the heart of the Chesapeake Bay. Launched in 1854 as the last all-sail ship designed and built for the United States Navy, Constellation's century of service embraced the ages of sail, steam, gas, diesel, and nuclear power. Imagine that, launched in 1854 and still afloat. Even more exciting, visitors can come aboard Constellation and explore to their heart's content. On board Constellation, history comes alive as visitors touch, feel, and experience what life was like for sailors during the Civil War. Just bring your imagination. Constellation is the second of 3 U.S. Navy vessels to carry the same venerable name. The first, the frigate Constellation, was built right here in Baltimore at Harris Creek and launched in 1797. Known as the Yankee Racehorse, the frigate Constellation was one of the first 6 ships built by the United States Navy. The ship you see here, the sloop of war Constellation, was built at the Gosport Navy Yard in Portsmouth, Virginia, and launched in 1854. A newspaper account from the day of her launch reported that there were 8 pieces of the original frigate Constellation contained within her timbers. The third Constellation was the aircraft carrier CV-64. Launched in 1960, she served until 2003. President Ronald Reagan called her America's flagship. But it's the sloop of war Constellation that's here in Baltimore today, and the Chesapeake Bay has always been central to her story.
Throughout her century of service, Constellation served in and out of the Chesapeake Bay. It was kind of like coming home every time she returned to the Chesapeake Bay. She was created here at Gosport Navy Yard. And throughout her career, she came to Annapolis. She spent many years there. She sailed to Philadelphia. She sailed up and down the bay several times. And every time that she returned, it was like a homecoming for her.
Constellation's early career is perhaps her proudest and most exciting. From 1855 to 1858, she sailed the Mediterranean to protect American interest and show the flag. From 1859 to 1861, she served as flagship of the U.S. African Squadron, cruising off the western coast of Africa in pursuit of American slave ships.
The most important thing that people learn on this ship that very few had ever heard of was the ship's relationship to the African Squadron. That this country did have at sea, before the Civil War, a fleet of ships designed solely to free slaves who'd been captured and were on their way to the Western Hemisphere.
Constellation captured 3 slave ships, Delicia, Cora, and Triton. Cora alone carried a human cargo of 705 captive Africans. While Constellation was flagship, the U.S. African Squadron captured 14 slave ships and freed almost 4,000 Africans destined for slavery in the Americas. During the Civil War, Constellation served once again in the Mediterranean, where she protected U.S. commerce, took part in the blockade against the Confederate raider Sumter, and showed the flag throughout the Mediterranean world. 1865 saw the end of Constellation's active sea service. From 1871 to 1893, home once again in the Chesapeake Bay, Constellation served as the practice ship for the midshipmen at the United States Naval Academy, where she earned the nickname the Cradle of Admirals. Constellation's cruising grounds stretched from Annapolis northward to Newport, Rhode Island, as the ship provided the future leaders of the United States Navy their summers of sail training at sea. In 1878, Constellation, along with the USS Constitution, sailed to Le Havre, France, carrying American exhibits for display at the Paris exhibition. In 1880, Constellation's guns were removed, her inner compartments reconfigured, and her hold filled with 500 tons of food and clothing destined for the relief of famine in Ireland. She departed from New York on March 30th and arrived in Queenstown, Ireland 3 weeks later. English and Irish dignitaries, including the Duke of Edinburgh himself, celebrated Constellation's mission of mercy. In 1892, Constellation made her last transatlantic voyage, carrying priceless works of art from Italy and France to America for display at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Constellation took her final cruise the next summer. As her crew of midshipmen disembarked, Constellation's sailing career was at an end. Although the age of sail had passed away, Constellation remained active, and from 1894 to 1933, she served as a stationary training ship at the U.S. Naval Training Center in Newport, Rhode Island. And it was there in Newport that Constellation saw her last official naval service as the relief flagship for the U.S. Navy's Atlantic Fleet and Battleship Squadron 5 during the Second World War. Almost 100 years old, USS Constellation was still serving her country. In 1955, Constellation returned home to the Chesapeake Bay, this time for permanent display in Baltimore. Constellation was kept afloat until 1994, when she was closed to the public. A critical restoration completed in 1999 ensured that the USS Constellation would remain open to visitors, and improvements to the ship continue today.
Constellation is constantly changing. If you came on board a year ago, you'll see something new today. If you come on a year from now, you'll see something new then. We're constantly working to improve the ship.
Constellation's restoration has helped keep Chesapeake Bay maritime trades and traditions alive. Today, Constellation is the largest example of Chesapeake Bay shipbuilding in existence. That's enough history for now. Let's see what happens when you come aboard Constellation.
When you come on board, cell phones and everything don't work anymore. This turns into the 1860s and you are back in time on the Constellation learning what it was like to be here.
People come on board and they get touched by this walking through history that they're able to do, and they're able to see the hammocks and see the officer's wardroom and sit in the captain's cabin and have this whole immersive experience that you're never going to get at most types of museums. So this is a really wonderful experience for them, and they have no idea what they're missing out on, and then they come on board and they keep coming back.
We fire the cannon, turn the capstan, and ring the bell daily, and we recommend the free self-guided audio tour, which comes in two flavors, one perfect for children, the other for adults. Plus, there's the ever-popular Powder Monkey Tour for kids and hands-on adult tours like A Ship as a Machine and Black Sailors in Navy Blue. Groups can also come aboard and sling their hammocks in our overnight program or host special events. Our crew knows the USS Constellation is an amazing experience, but don't just take our word for it. Here's what recent visitors had to say.
It's very kid-friendly, very family-oriented, and the kids will love it, and they'll come out asking questions, which I love.
It transports you back. You can almost get the feel that you were actually there, because laying in that hammock, like, oh my goodness.
I think it's really interesting because it shows you exactly how they slept and how they ate and how they went through life.
But it was an excellent tour, and I think it's something they need to maintain for generations to come.
Should be kind of a must for people who are in the area and have an hour or two to spend.
It's just amazing to see what people lived in, how hard they worked in order to accomplish what they did.
It brings your learning alive, and that it helps you to understand. Like, rather than looking at pictures, you can actually see what they were in, and you can actually understand it.
I think it makes me appreciate being an American, knowing these people went through these things to put me where I am now.
I'd say come see it.
Yeah, we were a little bit leery because of the age of our children, 4 and 7, but they enjoyed it so much. It really kind of surprised us. We thought it'd be more for us, the parents, but no, they loved it.
They had a good time.
Yeah, they had a great time.
So come aboard USS Constellation. And while you're here in Baltimore, be sure to visit these other attractions of the Chesapeake Bay Gateways Network. The Baltimore Visitor Center, a good place to start your tour of this historic city and region. The National Aquarium on Pier 3 near the USS Constellation Museum. The Lightship Chesapeake, and 7-Foot Knoll Lighthouse, both part of the Baltimore Maritime Museum. The Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Park and Museum, headquarters of the Living Classrooms Foundation. Fells Point, an early American shipbuilding center, and the Fells Point Maritime Museum. And of course, Fort McHenry National Monument, where the people of Baltimore valiantly defended the city from the British during the War of 1812, and Baltimore's own Francis Scott Key wrote our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. So welcome aboard USS Constellation and enjoy your visit to the historic sites of the Chesapeake Bay Gateways Network.
Wow, you didn't know all that, didn't you? We will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Downtown Baltimore. Baltimore is coming back. Have a look at this. Excitement about Baltimore. Anything you can do in this beautiful city. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Michael Gross, host of the B&O Railroad Museum Television Network. This is the Allegheny type locomotive, Chesapeake and Ohio, number 1604, the largest, most powerful steam locomotive on exhibit at the B&O Railroad Museum. This monster machine was designed to haul a 5,000-ton freight train at 45 miles per hour.
Designed by the Lima Locomotive Works, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad's 2666 Class H8 Allegheny locomotives were the most powerful reciprocating steam locomotives to be built anywhere in the world. While most of American industry was in a terrible economic slump during the 1930s, the C&O was busy constructing new tunnels, laying double track, rebuilding bridges, and generally upgrading their railroad system. This fortuitous situation was due to the main product they transported: coal. Some of the finest bituminous coal deposits in America were adjacent to the C&O routes, and coal was needed even during a poor economic climate. It became evident that the C&O would need additional motive power for the 80-mile coal run between Hinton, West Virginia, and Clifton Forge, Virginia, a route that crossed the Allegheny Mountains and included a 0.58% 13-mile grade up to a 2,072-foot summit and a descent of 1.14% into Clifton Forge. Severe grades and extremely heavy freight required locomotives with unprecedented power. This new locomotive, named in honor of the Allegheny Mountain Range it traveled, weighed over 775,000 pounds and used four 22.5-inch diameter cylinders with a 33-inch stroke. The articulated chassis carried a huge boiler with a 9-foot by 15-foot firebox, containing a 135-square-foot grate. The resulting rear weight required a 6-wheel trailer truck to support it. The tender was the largest ever designed for the C&O, weighing over 430,000 pounds and contained a 25,000-gallon water tank and a 25-ton coal bunker. The length of the locomotive and tender was limited by the length of existing roundhouse turntables, so the tender was designed to be short, and its rear section was designed high to carry a lot of weight. This configuration required an 8-wheel rear tender truck to distribute the load to the rails. Slightly over 124 feet, the length of the locomotive and tender proved to be one of the finest locomotive designs in American railroad history. The first Allegheny locomotive was built in 1941. How many years did they run before being replaced by diesel locomotives? We'll find out after this. Stay tuned for information on upcoming events at the B&O Railroad Museum. In December 1941, the first 10 locomotives produced were immediately pressed into service to meet the demands of World War II. The performance of the Allegheny was so impressive that the C&O ordered an additional 10 locomotives. During the war, the C&O had 23 of its Allegheny-class locomotives modified to include steam heating and signal lines for passenger service, but used them only rarely to haul a troop train or heavy mail train. Their more normal assignment was to haul a 10,000-ton freight train at 15 miles per hour. This is in stark contrast to their design goal of hauling a 5,000-ton train at 45 miles per hour. Thus, the Allegheny locomotives were never given the opportunity to demonstrate their full potential. Only 11 years later, in 1952, the 60 Alleghenies on the C&O roster were replaced by diesel locomotives. Only 2 Allegheny locomotives survived and are on public display today in the United States. Number 1601 is at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. Number 1604 is here at the B&O Railroad Museum in Baltimore, Maryland.
Plan a visit to the B&O Railroad Museum, where you can climb into the cab of the Allegheny and imagine what it was like to be the engineer. I'm Michael Gross, and thanks for watching the
Welcome back to Baltimore. We have a lot of guests here. We have a lot of celebrities in Baltimore. And one of them who loves Baltimore. His name is John Walters. Have a look at this.
I'm nuts about downtown Baltimore's West Side. Hello, I'm John Waters, and I'm proud to say that Baltimore has always been my home. It's the inspiration behind all my films, including Hairspray, Crybaby, Serial Mom, and A Dirty Shame. Let me tell you, there are not a more eccentric, monumental, eclectic, intriguing, and character-filled 28 blocks anywhere in the world, and I'm here to prove it to you. This is where Babe Ruth was born. They tell me he's the best baseball player ever. Not that I'd know. I'm more into theater. Like nearby Arena Players, the nation's longest continuously running African-American community theater. I'm also a big fan of Century-Old Antique Row, where New York dealers come to buy and later mark up their purchases sky high for their Manhattan buyers. On that same block sits the U.B. Blake National Jazz Institute, housing memorabilia from Baltimore jazz greats like Billie Holiday and, of course, U.B. himself. The West Side is also where the Maryland Historical Society calls home, with its many Baltimore artifacts, including the original manuscript of the Star-Spangled Banner and Nipper, the RCA dog. Oh, and the National Dentistry Museum, the only one of its kind in the U.S., is where George Washington's dentures live. And no, they were never wooden. And right in the middle of it all, as if just to add mystery and intrigue, sits the gravesite of Edgar Allan Poe, my kind of guy. Sometimes I go there to meditate. Now, the thing that defines Baltimore for many people around the world is right here also, our sports franchises, the Orioles and the Ravens, two birds that nest in the West. The Walters Art Museum is also known internationally, featuring an interactive experience exploring 55 centuries of art. A man named Gustav Krug worked at an ironworks foundry on Saratoga Street on the West Side way back in 1810, and it's still a working ironworks foundry today. 6th-generation Krugs still work here. In Baltimore, we find a good place, we like to stick with it. Now contrast that with one of the world's most advanced operating room facilities just a couple blocks away at the University of Maryland Medical System. Get ill, get fixed, have an operation in high style. Know of a place where the Beatles, Al Roker, Mother Teresa, and P.T. Barnum all hung out? I'll tell you, the west side of downtown Baltimore. Al Roker? He's done live shows at the world-famous Lexington Market, where you can shuck oysters and see some of the most amazing hairdos in town. The Beatles, Pavarotti, U2, you name them. They have played what used to be called the Civic Center, but is now called the First Mariner Arena. Aren't we grand? Mother Teresa, the Pope, and many presidents have all visited the Basilica of the Assumption, the first Roman Catholic cathedral in the United States. Photo ops, I assume. And as for P.T. Barnum, he, along with the likes of Cab Calloway, Chick Webb, Milton Berle, and a young, debuting Frank Sinatra, all performed at the world-famous Hippodrome Theater, one of the true cornerstones of the West Side. I saw Cleopatra there, and even shot parts of Cecil B. Demented outside before they fixed it up. The real story today, however, is how all that energy is coming back to the West Side, bigger, smarter, more fragrant, and more exciting than ever before. Major traveling Broadway shows like Phantom of the Opera and Disney's The Lion King, as well as events such as Russell Simmons' Deaf Poetry Jam and local community events now perform in Baltimore for the first time thanks to the Hippodrome Theater at the Franz Marek Performing Arts Center. The world-renowned University of Maryland has broken ground on a state-of-the-art biopark that puts the West Side on the global map as a major biotechnology hub. The Stewart's Building, once a thriving department store, is the very definition of an environmental-friendly green building. And don't let the facade fool you. This office and retail space is wired with the most high-tech, broadband infrastructure technology imaginable. And a luxury apartment building known as the Atrium at Market Center even has a direct connection to the university's main network. There are so many ongoing projects like Market Center West residential units, University of Maryland housing, plus an important redevelopment of an area called the Superblock, where local small business owners have been invited to partner with public and private entities to upgrade their properties. Everyone is playing a role in the renaissance of the West Side. Many major players have come to bat in this more than $1 billion revitalization of downtown's West Side, like Bank of America, who believes so much in this endeavor that it bought an entire city block to renovate, and erect a mixed-use development called Center Point, offering nearly 400 residential units and 35,000 square feet of retail space. It's the total commitment of Governor Robert Ehrlich, Mayor Martin O'Malley, and all the legislators, along with the Baltimore Development Corporation and the 40-plus members of West Side Renaissance, led by Peter Angelos, that are ensuring the success of what the New York Times calls the largest revitalization plan of its kind in the country. And it's all happening in this one neighborhood called downtown Baltimore's West Side. Infectious, fashionable, full of vim and Baltimore vigor, I walk the West Side streets these days in amazement at what it's become. I'm nuts about downtown Baltimore's West Side. You will be, too.
Wow, I never knew that Baltimore is such a fascinating city. Beautiful, exciting, so many festivals here, and Baltimore City is a place where they shoot so many movies. House of Cards, Six Seasons, Veep, so many of them. We own the city. Just recently was the Disney the spook who sat by the door. It's a beautiful town, and you never knew it, but so many movies here. It's close to the capital, Washington, D.C., and majority is actually here, not in the capital. We will be right back. Stay with us.